Okay. Time for the last talk of the day. And once again, like an example of what I was just saying before, of people really, like local people doing great stuff also around us, and we give them the opportunity to talk about that. Roland is here to talk to you about testing design, and I'll let you enjoy the talk.
Oh, okay. Hi. Hi, thank you for having me. I've heard that there was a discussion about consultants, so I'm sorry for having my consultant suit on still. I plan to bring at least my designer's turtleneck or wear my programmer's shirt, but I didn't manage, so I'm sorry for the white shirt. So my talk is about testing design. And this was a very simple story because I did this talk in springtime and thought, well, might be good for a front-end conference as well. Problem is I read the book over summer and I had to change everything. So I'm looking forward to hearing what the outcome might be. So I have a plan, at least, 4 steps. I want to look into what is design about. Who of you is a designer? Okay, rest is coders, business people. Yes, oh yes.
Raise your hand. This is 100%.
Thank you very much. How about psychologists? Oh, this is going to be a hard time for me. I'm trying to talk about psychology as well. Okay, so these are my 4 steps. And I'm going to introduce you to great design first, and then we're going to test it. A great UI design, that's usually based on real things, right? If it looks like concrete, it will behave like concrete, and all this makes sense. I have a really great example. It's taken from a usability study someone did and posted on the web. So this is really authoritative materials. I'm going to show you the design. Probably nobody knows it yet. So this is an example of the design is like the real world. Like it? Nobody liked it, actually. So this is like a power plant. Okay, a person in charge found out after extensive tests of some sort that this is not a good design, and they decided that they got to reduce like the elements they use and the colors and stuff. So they came up with iteration 2. Looked like this. This is really a true story, real software, not made up by me. So second iteration was like 4 elements, all in all, really reduced. But after another sequence of extensive tests of some sort, they found out that this still is not good design. Okay, so they found out we need to be specific. Well, basically, we want to have the best of all worlds. Who has heard this argument before, best of all worlds, in a briefing? Raise your hands. Thank you. Okay, best of all worlds design is usually also disruptive innovation. Who has done disruptive innovation yet? How did you find out that it is disruptive? You're rich, right? Okay, so this was a disruptive innovation solution of the same project. So they mixed very specific elements with like metrics and scales and stuff. Not much better. If you're interested in reading the whole paper, I can give you the URL. So this was my entry point. Should have been fun. The building blocks of design. What is design made of? I'm sorry, designers, if I hit on this again. So I started up as a designer. I had to code for myself because in the ages of Lingo and multimedia, designers did this by themselves. Now I'm working as a consultant. So I know both sides of the story. So building blocks of design, basically it's 2 things we are caring about. It's emotionality, design is always emotional. Who of you is doing more emotional design? Yeah, you don't say that, right? Who is doing more like B2B design, functional design? Yes, someone at least. The others don't design at all, it seems. Okay. Wolfgang Beinert, everybody knows him, very famous graphics designer. Germany said, well, contents get lost, but the emotion stays. That's the secret behind emotions. Emotion is important in design, and this is an aspect when testing that makes it really hard. How do you find out about emotions? Do you really do market research? Do you ask your, tell me? Okay. We, at NOS, we use proved recipes for emotionality, and there's a tool for that called Placed Kitten. It's a cliche, yeah, but it works. So this is really a tool. Who knows Placed Kitten? Yeah, everybody, okay. Let's switch. Next thing, design is functional. Even if design is functional, if you have functions, you have still the emotion, so it's a mix-up. So that's why design sometimes is hard to do. I love Dilbert, especially if we are talking about technology. Okay. Easy to use. Yeah. What makes very functional software? If you condense it and make it really functional, the outcome is this. It's just condensed, not very emotional. But have you ever had a project where people were fighting for a command line? It happens. This is also a very emotional thing, because if you know how to use it, if you know the efficiency of a good command line tool, you don't want to have anything else. Right? So this is great design as well. Or, so if you look at the command line, say, well, great design, that's form plus function. Somehow it's not form follows function. That was yesterday, form plus function. Then if you take the prior example and combine it, then you get the user interface, and that's not great design, because it's mimicking functionality on like a user interface. Actually, there are like 15 variants of user interfaces for this wget thing. Okay. And none of these is great design, because always hidden below the surface is still the command line. Okay, I think we got the point. It's easy. For great design, you need intuition and you need reason, mind, and some spirits. If you combine this, you can still end up here. You know that? Kerman's teapot, an invention by Dan Norman. And I think it's a really good image of what just combining function with great form can result in. So because I have no clue what really a good design makes, I ask the experts. I have the impression from what I said that design follows certain rules, and if we want to test afterwards, I think it might be good to know the rules and know the goals of the design. So if we ask our hero Dieter Rams, that's like the father of Jonathan Ive of Apple. He often refers to him. He practiced design rules, and fortunately for us, he wrote his design rules down in 1995. So I mainly did products, and this is the list he came up with. This is really interesting, because this is he was trying to formalize, put in sentences what makes great design in his eyes. So if you want to be a rock star designer, I got this, you have to come up with your own rules or copy these one. Don't know what is better. I put the gray ones. I put some in gray and some in black. And this is an assumption of which rules are easier to test and which are harder. So the more emotional, subjective things are always harder to test. And there are some things where we find out, yeah, there should be easy metrics for this. So it's hard to come up with a metric of honesty, right? Does someone have it? I would be interested. Okay, we don't have honesty or obtrusiveness scales or metrics. Okay, so this is Dieter Rams. The most famous one is the last one, by the way. If you want to have a quote, good design is as little design as possible. So that's the spirit of his design. And now, if you put these rules in your mind and watch the following images, probably you know them all, then if it's good design, it follows these rules, right? My impression is, well, it's a good match. So great design follows rules that we can test against. So we know that Dieter Rams is a rockstar designer. He's probably a genius in design. For everybody of us, can we do that as well? Yes, we can. There's, if you do programming, UI designs, this is the front-end conference after all, there are guidelines for you as well. So we have this one from Apple. Interface guidelines, well, until the last iteration. This is what Apple gives us. Again, the gray ones are not that easy to measure, I think, and the black ones you can measure or make a study on. That's quite simple to set up. So these are guidelines that are easy to follow. The second aspect of the guidelines is, do the guidelines like preclude the result of the design process somehow? How can they influence them? If you look at the guidelines, the rules, does this image come to your mind? That's the actual image that comes with these sentences. So that's what Apple means by those rules. Did you notice metaphors? That's what we designers have been talking about for the last year, and that's the reason why Apple changed in iOS 7 their design completely, right? So this was a guiding rule for their design. So they thought about it, they formalized it. It was not by chance. It was their idea, their mission. Scott Forstall was like the person who was standing behind this, besides Steve Jobs. Okay. This is Microsoft. They have it as well. So these are the guidelines, I think, for Windows Phone 8. So they have design principles as well, and they have also more design principles that you can put metrics behind. Pride in craftsmanship is, for me, was a surprising thing, by the way. Craftsmanship, Microsoft, doesn't come easily for me. Okay, but the result, you'll know, is this. I think these design rules are more like team spirit and basic values, and it's not so much a rule that helps you while working every day. So, third example, Google. The most famous design rule of Google is every millisecond counts, right? Because they introduced the concept of performance of user interface early on. It was one of the first principles that I heard of. Interesting for me was that they have lots of guidelines that you can't put metrics behind so easily. It's a lot about values like human touch, trust, design for the world. Okay. And they come up with this solution. It's Google Now. Who uses Google Now? Oh, not so popular in Switzerland, right? Well, I don't understand what it's good for. Okay. If we look what happens if you formalize design rules and come up with a design, then the question is, what is the design after all good for? We say it creates usefulness, it makes it relevant and such, but design has another important role. It helps you differentiate your product, at least if you're in a crowded marketplace. So this is, for instance, if you come up with the idea of inventing a new mail client, then it's not just functionality, it's a lot of the difference between the solutions is design, the feel and the look of the thing. So if we have to test this solution against that one, which one is better? Do we have the metrics? Is that better? Or is this one better, which comes also from Microsoft? Why, by the way, do they have two mail programs at the moment? I don't understand that. Okay. So same applies if you look at current applications. Image sharing is very popular, I hear. So we have lots of applications that do image sharing. The difference is in the design and the user experience. Pinterest or Instagram. I love all interfaces that have cork in the background. Gives me such a homey feeling. Okay. So why is it hard to test design? Now comes the hard part for me. This is my summer intervention. I wanted to explain what I think is the connection between rules and design results, because rules for me are important, because then I know what to test. If I said I want to have a very quick interface, then I want to test the task performance of my application. So then came summer. I bought a book called Thinking Slow, Thinking Quick, Fast, I think it's fast, by Daniel Kahneman. He's a Nobel Prize laureate for economics and one of the most renowned psychologists in the world. And he explained, well, most of what you feel comes from your brain, and your brain is made up of like two things, System 1 and System 2 it's called. System 1 and System 2, these are like two people living in a small room. The one behaves like a kid, always on, always interested, always hopping around, always impulsive, and a grown-up person, deliberate thinking and a bit lazy. Okay, that's your mind. You're unconscious and you're conscious. Do you put that into your equation when testing or designing? What happens if someone sees it? Are you aware of that? The psychologists have to be aware of it. I, as a trained designer, am not always aware of it. I haven't been. So that's why I think it's worth looking into. So the first thing I learned is, oh, this was the wrong direction, I'm sorry. I'm biased. You're biased. We are always biased. So the biases is something I learned a lot about. So do you want me to prove that you are biased as well? Who's interested? I have some of the old school tests with me, and this is really scary, creepy. Okay, first thing. I have to drink something. I guide you to from some tests that I took from the textbook, okay? I'm not a psychologist. But if I do my work good of copying something over, you will still have the chance to learn something. So first effect is anchoring. This is interesting experiment. So two people set up a wheel of fortune and they modified it so it would only put out a 10 and a 65. Then they put up a test with test persons and they would ask them to turn the wheel, write down the number they get, and then answer one question. So they would always get either 10 or 65. So they put down 10 or 65. And then they were asked, is the percentage of African nations among UN members larger or smaller than the number you just wrote? Would you know that by heart? Yeah, that's a problem. Nobody knows. But you had to give a question. Second question, what is your best guess of the percentage of African nations in the UN? Hard question. So what happened is that the persons who saw a 10, they would on average write down 25. The persons who saw 65, they would on average write down 45. So this is not something I made up now for you. This is real scientific experiments. Yeah. Okay, this is anchoring. Another test. I have to speed up, I'm sorry. Will this be the next president of the United States? This is a really hard question. Who knows this person? Don't spoil it, don't say. will this be the next president of the United States? We do the test here. Who thinks this could be the next president of the United States? Raise your hands, please. You trust him. Why did you say so? Yes. Yeah. That's great. Even though you didn't know it, you had a feeling, an impression, and your subconscious made the equation, simplified the equation. Because you cannot answer the exact question, you simplify it. This happens all the time. If we have to answer hard questions, we simplify. Because your answer was, this person looks trustworthy. And that was perhaps, sorry for taking you as an example, but this is what happens, okay? Subconscious, we divide problems in smaller problems until we have a solution. This simplification process often runs well, but sometimes it runs in the wrong direction. Conclusion can be really wrong. Next thing. How's your life? Looking at this image? Well, next question. How's your life looking at this image? This really makes a difference. We know this from advertisements. It's called the reality first rule. So even though you don't want to be influenced by these images, it just happens. You can measure that. This thing not only happens with decision making and thinking, it even influences your body. So there was an experiment that I found very impressive. So if you look at these 5 terms and make a sentence that contains 4 of these words. Think about it. You know about Florida, all the age people of America who live there. Okay. So if you make this 4-word sentence and say this 4-word sentence, your mind is concerned about aging. So an experiment goes like this. People were asked to make this 4-word sentence and then go down the aisle to collect a certificate from the secretary. And the people doing this experiment were measuring the time it took the test people to go down that aisle. People answering this question were going slower than the others who had 5 different words that were more activating. Okay? Well, thinking about this, I should have begun my talk differently. I should have said, "Welcome to this awesome show!" Because this would have affected you, but, well, we're in Switzerland, right? Okay, another thing, priming. Priming happens all the time. This is basic. The basic rule of advertising is priming. You see this beautiful woman, this makes an influence if you want or not, and you're less or more inclined to do something or don't do it. If you see these banknotes and I drop something, you're less inclined to help me pick it up. This happens. It's called priming. And even if you're a really good person, this happens to you as well. You can measure it. Okay, let's move on to attention. So you're biased because attention is hard. You remember the 2 systems? Attention was on the right side of the business. Each person is responsible for attention. This person is lazy. You have to wake up this person. Thinking is hard. It takes lots of energy. So let me take it to a test regarding attention. Please count the number of feet of this elephant. Okay, I have a harder test. This is for real now. On the next slide, I will ask you to count all the F's in the text. All. Take your time. I'll give you like a minute or so. Check twice. And I'll ask you for your result. Please don't exchange results, okay? This is really fun. Do you see it? second is not moving. Finished? Yeah. All right? Okay, let's take the test. There are no hard consequences, okay? Please, people who have found 9 Fs, raise your hands. Yes, 9, okay, that's great. Is there anybody having more than 9? Oh, most of you. 10? 11? 12? Wow. 13? Are there double? 14? Okay, that's interesting. Okay, well, I've checked this like 10 times. The average was 13. So the textbook says people having a result of 13 are geniuses. Congratulations. It's a great talk. I made you all a genius. Now, what happens is it's hard to wake up this person. So obviously, you're really alert. You have tried hard because there are lots of people who only come up with 6, 7, or 8. Okay? So this was great. And it shows us that it's really hard to do a really simple task sometimes under conditions. It has to do with reading, actually. So there's another text test I like a lot. So it goes like this. Can you read this? It's really simple. This is amazing, right? Our image processing facilities go way beyond everything our computers can do. Image recognition. We are super pattern matchers. We even can do this if it moves. So this is a great ability our visual system has. And our visual system can do this under much worse conditions than this one. Okay, so there are more psychological effects, but I have to move on. Yeah, perhaps I have one thing more. Can you do that calculation? What's the right answer? 5 minutes, right? You all agree? It's 5 minutes, right? Okay. So, another thing is the so-called snap test. It works. Did you notice this image? Even if you only see it for 50 milliseconds, this will influence your answer. Although your conscious doesn't know about what was in the image, your subconscious knows. Smiling person, this makes the result of this question better for me. This was the image in the background. By the way, this is forbidden in advertising for a reason, because it really works. It goes deep into your brain, and you have no control. There is another test connected to like exposure time. It's a 5-second test. First one was 50 milliseconds, or snap test, and this one is the 5-second test. So would you please tell me something about this website after seeing it for 5 seconds? Okay, this was a cute example, I think. But this happens with, this is valid for all sorts of designs and websites. So if you think about like your content strategy, you're putting together images and messages on your website or design, 5 seconds is the time you have to bring your first message across. So you know this famous first impression, that's the 50 milliseconds. And the second thing is like you have 5 seconds to get the first message across. And this is a really cheap and simple test. You can do that every day. And it's really valid because you know if you're focused. You know focus is important, especially if you're doing e-commerce websites. Okay, so how to test then? So this was my little journey through psychology. I can only recommend to read this book, Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Slow, Thinking Quick. Langsam denken, schnelles denken in German. I'm not affiliated in any way with him. I just like the book, really. So how can we test then? So this is step 3 of my 4-step program. And I put together a matrix of popular testing methods that I found like in literature, in the office, and somewhere else. So this contains many of the things that you will meet in your regular testing life. So we have usability, classic usability things, and we have very simple tests like the snap test or the 5-second test. My point is, whenever you test or have to test or want to test, you should test always. You know about Agile, demo and test every week. Then it is very important to choose the right test for the goal you have. And this is really tricky. You know about that. So if you ask like 100 people regarding a very unfinished basic product, you won't get a good result. You'll have lots of effort, not much input. Because a not finished result should be tested against experts who can make the abstraction of knowing what an unfinished product could be about. Okay? Do you know that situation? So I don't have like the clues on what test to choose, but what my observation is that oftentimes in projects people tend to use formally recognized and valid procedures that often happen to be very expensive, like formal usability tests with at least 5 to 7 testing persons. That's really valid. I don't want to dispute the validity, but it's only valid, or the most value in this testing method is if you put it at the right point in your project, right? If you do it every week, then results may vary. So please pick testing methods flexibly. And this chart should show that there are lots of testing methods around, and you can pick them very quickly. So in our projects, usually in the beginning, we tend to rather do like these low budget, low involvement tests that are just quick, like the hallway test or a little exposure test, and or with experts, and then we move on gradually to involve more users over time. This is something we do. Most people that do testing do it likewise. So we have lots of tools, and I would like to show you some of the tools that help to cover these effects that we just learned about. So there's a tool actually for 5 seconds testing. It's online, it's free. It's called Usability App. So if you want to have all the links, I will compile a list afterwards. So just ask me, I'll send it. Or I add it to the slide set once I upload it. Okay. So then one funny thing is drunk testing. Who's done that? It's a method. Just think about a taxi service for picking you up in the restaurant. This absolutely should pass the drunk test. Drunk test goes like this. We don't go through the whole session, but just to give it.
Absolutely, yes. Full sentences. I am an active computer user with a laptop. I mean, I use it to check my email. I use it to do the work I do. I use it for. I'm a cyborg. I'm connected to it all the time. I see rectangles and squares in various colors. Then there's something called messaging, which, I don't know, is that some kind of text thing that you do on a laptop? And then there's desktop. That's the stuff that I've saved to my desktop with the with the silver potatoes. And there's store, there's maps, there's SkyDrive, who knows what that is. Music, videos, camera, games, Budapest. Then something called rah.com. And then an elephant's head. And it's called Evernote. Okay, so now I'm in mail mode. Ooh, but it's gone back to the start page. So let's try it again. I'm in mail. Mail. All right, well, I'm going to try the plus. I mean, that's the best we've got going for us, right? Ooh, yeah. Okay. I think this is it. But it is a really weird interface. I mean, what the fuck? It's just blank. It's blank and it's not the customary...
The only tool, the most important tool for this test, sorry to interrupt, it's on YouTube. Important tool for this test is here. I didn't go deep into checking the validity of this test. My impression is she's very honest and she talks more than she would usually do. This can be an advantage. Remember, we're in Switzerland. Who's had the problem of usability tests where people don't talk at all? I had this several times. I'll bring my schnapps next time. Okay. So there's more to the emotional testing. Remember, what drove me to think about this presentation is like, how do we test emotions after all? So there's valid stuff here. It's the emotion measuring. And there's a method that goes with these 10 basic facial expressions. The idea of the test very simply is that you monitor people and you take down notes on what expression they take when. And then you have like an interpretation guide on how to interpret the facial expressions in that test. That's really very formalized. And it's hard to do, I guess. Even for this kind of test, has someone done this really with facial expressions? I thought it was very academic when I found this tool here. It's called Primo. Make sure to use primo.com and not primo.ch. Primo.ch is a breeding boar. Zuchteber. Okay. Primo. So this uses a more advanced version of the facial expression test. It uses small animated sequences to show you the emotion. And this really helps to interpret or get a better match of the facial expression or the emotional expression of the person. So it's a small difference, but a very useful tool. So this can be used for all sorts of testing because it's not screen-based. Just the interpretation of the test result is screen-based. So then I have one famous thing. You know, I work in a branding agency. Logos some of our work, so no logo testing. Have you done that? If you apply no logo test to this website, then you can say, well, this brand is very, in their design language, it makes a difference. It's kind of unique, and we all know it. Then we have another large company, the logo test. Who's that? Do you know them? It's IBM, but I think it's hard if you're not in the industry to really find out that this could be like the largest IT consultancy in the world. Okay. No logo test is good to find out if your brand really works, if your design has some differentiating factor to it, or if it's just generic. You know, over discussions when developing a design, this sometimes happens that your design gets more generic, because your client wants you to change this and that and stuff. So with a simple logo test, no logo test, you can bring them back to a road where you can emphasize more the uniqueness of your design. So then we have click testing, heat maps. Do you remember the times when we used to go to usability labs to do tests with the eye tracking technology? This is like the cheaper brother of eye tracking because it just tracks the cursor. And it gives you a nice heat map and shows you if you have enough data, if where people go with their mouse cursor and where they interact. Okay, this is really valuable if you want to know more about the click streams in your website or application. Therefore, that is on Intuition HQ. I think there are more tools for that. Then very valuable stuff is A/B testing. If you have traffic, if you have a running application and users, not just 2 per day, but a bit more, then you can do A/B testing. Do you know about A/B testing? Everybody, do you want to know more about A/B testing? Example, I would like to skip it because I'm short in time. So can we skip it? Hands up. Okay. Yeah, that's more than half of you. Remote usability testing. So if you have an international application, international markets, it's always hard to move your usability lab to New York City. So remote usability testing is something that really comes at a budget today. The hardest thing is to find like an agent over there who will guide people to the lab and back. Moray is a classic application for that. Do you have a tool? Okay, testing.com. So then to finish it all up, market research. Who's into market research? Asking everybody in Switzerland. Yeah, so I think this is still valid. I recognize that in our industry, market research doesn't have the best image because it tends to produce lots of data, hard to interpret and stuff. I think there's a lot of validity to it, especially if you're in a crowded marketplace, if you look for consumer goods and try to find your one small differentiating niche. So I think market research is still valid. I want to point you to some smart guys here in Zurich. We are not affiliated. They're called Accelerom, and they do something they call 360 degrees touchpoint analysis. So this maps your question not only to a certain segment of your market, to users, but it also maps it to touch points you have. Touch points, that means mobile or desktop, as well as retail and newspaper, SMS, window display, and what else. So this gives you, in like the form of classic interviews, more results to build on, because what you know afterwards is not only what people think, but also where to invest, right? Should I build a retail location in Zurich City, or should I rather go for a loyalty program? That's a question they can ask. So, okay, we have opened the spectrum of methods, and I'm really running out of time, so I'm pointing you to like 3 addresses to go to. The question to close it is, how do the big companies do their design testing? And it's actually a bit hard to find out. Google is quite transparent because they have tools they want to market, so A/B testing is something they're making money of. One interesting thing is that Google found out, so I make it short now, so they use usually pulse metrics. So they measure page views, uptime, latency, 7-day active users, and earnings. It's like the kind of data you have in your analytics program. So with recent research, they added something that's called hard metrics. And this is really interesting because they can measure happiness, engagement, adoption, retention, and task success. How do they do that? They don't ask people. They just go into their data. So what they do is they will correlate certain signals in their analytics data, so they find out about happiness. So happiness is not really hard metrics, it's an interpretation, like a metadata set they find. So they find out about engagement. That's simpler. If people come back and act more, that's more valuable than people coming back more often and doing less. Okay? So that's one of the examples for how you can measure engagement. Okay. Next thing, I think this is the largest usability lab in the world. That's where Apple does their market research. Just one takeaway. Apple always claimed they don't do market research at all. They just make judgments. Fact is, in the course of the Samsung trial, they had to admit that they actually do market research. And what they said is that they don't look at everybody to do market research, but they just look at their customers. So they're only interested in people that already like Apple or lean towards buying products with Apple. If you look at this, then for me it's obvious that by testing just your clients, you will have a different solution than asking everybody. Okay? I think that's interesting. But we don't know all the details about how they do it and what results they take. So the third one would be Microsoft. I didn't really find out how they really test. There's just a really silly movie on YouTube. They have lots of user research. There are large user research programs, but they don't say what metrics they use, what methodology, and what they come up there. Okay. Last question. So I'll provide you with the link. It's fun. It begins in, I think, 100,000 before Christ with usability testing. Silly. How does Dieter Rams test? I don't really know. He's a genius. Perhaps he doesn't have to test. Okay. We have like 20 new geniuses here in the room. You're all people you don't have to test, right? That's great. Okay, my conclusion, and to make it short, choose your test wisely. Results are directly connected to the testing method, and these are connected directly to the goals you had. Okay, simple. So, in a conclusion, different brands use different testing, but for the same purpose. Specific testing methods are brand influences. The way you test will influence your result. Okay? Testing is important not only to remove errors, but also to optimize the result. Okay. If metrics aren't actionable, they aren't useful. This is not my phrase, but I think this is a good closing statement. Only measure things that you understand. Only use data that you have understood and can use for the progress of your project. Okay, so this was a bit of a hurried excursion into some kind of testing and psychology. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much for raising your hands occasionally. If you have questions, I think we have 1.5 minutes left, right?
Well, first of all, thank you. So I can promise one question if you can put it in one sentence and one sentence for the answer.
Be focused. I'm sorry? 13. You don't believe me? 12 is really great. So I have to admit, when I counted it first time, it was 8. Okay? What other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.